Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into something I know you guys want to be ready for. That big test.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about the LAPD Social Media Manual. Now, I know what you're thinking, 2015.
Yeah,
That's like ancient history and internet years, right?
it's true, but
But here's the thing. This manual, it's like the foundation. It's like the Bill of Rights for cops online.
I like that.
So yeah, it's 2015. But the principles, the core ideas,
Yeah.
still super relevant.
Absolutely.
And speaking of staying relevant, don't forget those updates,
Yes.
supplements, policy changes, all that good stuff. Always, always double check for the latest.
Couldn't agree more. That's key.
Because the internet, well, it never sleeps.
Never sleeps. Always evolving.
So you got to stay ahead of the game.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing today, laying that groundwork, getting that solid understanding how to use social media effectively in our work. So even though this manual is from 2015, think of it like the blueprint. But just like, if you were building something today, you'd want the most up-to-date blueprints, right?
For sure.
Same idea here. The manual is a great starting point, but always check for any new guidelines, any updates that have come out since then.
Okay, so first things first. The manual, it actually defines what social media is.
It does.
And it's way more than, like
Yeah.
your aunt's cat pics on Facebook. Right?
Way more. The LAPD was really forward-thinking back then. They knew this stuff was going to explode. So they were smart. They included everything. Blogs, forums, you remember those old school chat rooms?
Oh, yeah.
They're in there. I mean, if people are connecting, creating content, sharing, the LAPD considers it all a fair game for this manual.
So it's a broad definition.
Very broad. And that's important for your test, too.
Okay, so that test, they're going to want you to know just how wide this definition of social media really is.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got this wide scope, all these different platforms.
Yeah.
How does the manual approach that balance?
What balance?
Our rights as officers
Okay.
and the public's rights online.
Ah, right. It starts with a reminder. Everyone has the right to free speech, even if we don't like what they're saying.
So even if
Even if,
someone's being super critical of the LAPD.
especially then.
Wow.
Remember, we're held to a higher standard,
Right.
and the manual's crystal clear on this. No inciting illegal activity.
Okay, that makes sense.
In fact, you know what phrase they use?
What's that?
Agent provocateur.
Asian provocateur.
Straight out of a spy movie.
Yeah, sounds pretty serious.
It is. We can't be out there stirring up trouble.
So we've got free speech. That's one thing. But what about privacy? Where does the Fourth Amendment come in?
Good question.
Right.
And it's one that's still being worked out in the courts. But the manual stresses caution, especially when it comes to information that's not publicly available.
Like what?
Think password-protected accounts. You wouldn't just walk into someone's home without a warrant, right?
Right.
Same principle applies online.
Okay, so the manual, it lays down the ground rules, but it also gets into the specifics.
Oh.
The ways we can actually use social media in police work.
Right.
And they break it down into these, like, 3 pillars.
Do 3 pillars.
I love it. I'm ready to dive into these.
Let's do it. The 3 pillars are situational awareness, investigations, and then community relations and engagement. And each one, well, it has its own uses, its own challenges. So understanding all 3, it's key.
For the test.
Definitely for the test, but also for applying what you learn, to your everyday work.
Out on the streets.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with that first pillar. Situational awareness.
Okay, situational awareness.
It's like having eyes and ears everywhere, but online.
Right. You got it. Imagine you're prepping for a big event like downtown.
Okay.
You can monitor social media, see what people are saying. Are they planning protests? Are there rumors flying around that could cause trouble?
Oh, that's smart.
It gives you real-time intel.
So it's about being proactive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the manual, it gets really practical here. It even mentions specific tools you can use.
Like what?
Google Alerts. Have you used those?
I've heard of them.
You can set them up for keywords, a certain neighborhood, a type of crime, and you get notified whenever those pop up online. Super useful. Especially for the test, They want to know you can apply these concepts.
This is not just theory.
Right. It's about taking that knowledge and putting it into action.
Speaking of practical tools,
Yeah.
what about those RSS feeds?
Oh, those are great too. Think of them like creating a custom newsfeed, but just for your area of responsibility.
Ah, so you can stay on top of what's happening in your specific beat.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered situational awareness. That's pillar number 1. What's next?
Investigations. Pillar number 2. And this is where social media really changes the game.
How so?
Well, imagine you're trying to find a missing person.
Okay.
In the past, you might have put up flyers, asked around. Now you can check their social media.
See if they've posted anything recently.
Exactly. Maybe they shared their location, or they're interacting with someone who might know where they are.
So it can provide crucial leads.
Absolutely. And it's not just missing persons.
Oh,
Remember reading about those LAPD burglary detectives?
the ones who use social media to recover all that stolen stuff?
Yes. That online sting operation was brilliant.
It was.
They noticed all these stolen items popping up for sale online, so what did they do?
They posed as buyers.
Yep. Set up a meet and caught the thieves red-handed. Talk about using social media to fight crime in new ways.
That's thinking outside the box.
And that's what the manual encourages. And again, for the test, it's great to see those practical examples.
It shows you really get it.
Right. You know the theory, but you can also connect it to real-world situations.
That's the key.
That's how you know you're ready to apply this knowledge out on the streets.
All right, so we've got situational awareness. We've got investigations. What's that third pillar?
The third pillar is community relations and engagement. And this is where social media, I think, can really shine. It's about building trust, building positive relationships.
So it's like community policing, but in the digital space.
Exactly. It's all about meeting people where they are. And these days, well, a lot of people are online. The manual highlights how senior lead officers can use social media to connect with their communities.
So instead of just posting a flyer on a bulletin board.
Right. You could use Facebook to announce a neighborhood cleanup or share crime prevention tips.
Much more engaging.
Way more engaging. And it allows for two-way communication.
People can ask questions.
Yeah, share their concerns, feel heard. The manual even suggests starting a blog to keep residents informed about what's happening in their area.
I like that.
It's all about transparency, building
Right.
that sense of partnership,
Yeah.
between the police and the community.
That's a great point. And all of this ties back to the test too, right?
Absolutely. They want to see that you understand how to use social media to promote positive community engagement.
Okay, so we've covered those three pillars: situational awareness, investigations, community relations. That's the good stuff, the ways we can use social media effectively. But let's face it, there's also a flip side.
There is.
Social media can be a minefield, especially for cops.
You're not kidding. One wrong move and things can blow up.
And that's where the manual's do's and don'ts come in.
That's right. This section, it's crucial. Understanding the boundaries, protecting yourself.
And the department.
Exactly.
So let's start with the don't do's. What are some things that could get an officer in hot water online?
Well, some are obvious. No illegal activity, no using your position for personal gain,
Right.
and definitely no posting offensive content. That should go without saying.
But it's good to have it spelled out.
Oh, absolutely. It's all
Uh,
right there in black and white.
But I bet there are some things that officers might not even realize are off limits.
Oh, there are. For example, did you know that endorsing commercial products is a big no-no,
Really.
even off-duty? It's about avoiding even the appearance of a conflict of interest.
So no raving about your favorite energy drink on your personal Facebook page.
Nope. Even if you think you're just being helpful. And it's not just products.
What else?
Expressing political opinions, religious beliefs, all that while on duty, or using department social media accounts, that's off limits too.
It's about keeping it professional.
Exactly. Maintaining that professional image.
Focusing on the mission of the LAPD.
Right. And remember, these rules, they apply whether you're on duty or off.
So 24/7.
204/7. Anything you post online, it can reflect on the department. It can come back to haunt you. Think, conduct unbecoming an officer.
Okay, so those are some serious don'ts. What about the DOs? What does the manual encourage?
The DOs are all about using social media strategically, professionally, sticking to official channels, following the media guide when releasing information,
Makes sense.
and always, always communicating respectfully.
Even when you're dealing with difficult people.
Especially then, it's about taking the high road.
And accuracy is key too, right?
Absolutely. Double check those facts before you hit post. Misinformation spreads like wildfire online. We don't want to contribute to that.
Good point. And remember, social media can be a powerful tool for connecting with the community.
Yes. Use it to share positive stories. Highlight the good work the LAPD is doing. Build those bridges of trust.
Now let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Talk about using social media in investigations.
All right.
Specifically, gathering evidence.
Tricky territory, but important.
How do we do it without violating people's rights?
That's the key question. And remember, the Fourth Amendment, it applies online just as much as it does offline. We can't just go snooping through people's private messages or accessing their accounts without proper legal justification.
So what are the rules of the game?
Well, first off, anything that's publicly available, that's fair game. If a suspect posts about their crime on their open Facebook page, that's evidence we can use.
But even then, there's a right way and a wrong way to collect that evidence.
You got it. We have to document everything carefully, follow chain of custody procedures, make sure we're not violating any privacy laws.
What about situations where the information isn't public?
That's where things get a little trickier. We might need to get a warrant to access a suspect's private social media accounts. Or we might need to work with the social media companies themselves to obtain data.
So it's not as simple as sending a friend request.
Definitely not. There are legal procedures we have to follow. We want to make sure any evidence we gather is admissible in court.
Speaking of court, the manual mentions online undercover activity. What's that all about?
That's some advanced stuff. It's where investigators create fake online personas, to gather information or to make contact with suspects. It's a specialized area, requires specific training and authorization.
So not something your average patrol officer would be doing.
Right, usually reserved for units that are investigating serious crimes.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I'm curious about using personal devices for police work.
Personal devices, yeah, the manual addresses that directly. Officers are allowed to use their personal devices for work-related social media, but there's a catch.
What's the catch?
They need to get approval from their commanding officer and document that approval. It's all about transparency and accountability.
So no checking your personal Twitter on duty unless you've got the green light.
Exactly. And remember, any work you do on your personal device, even off-duty, needs to be in line with the Fair Labor Standards Act. No unpaid overtime.
Good point. Now, we've been talking a lot about the practical side of things, the rules, the guidelines. But I'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the ethical consideration.
Oh, absolutely. Just because something is legal doesn't necessarily mean it's ethical.
That's right. We need to think about the potential impact of our actions, not just on individuals, but on the community as a whole.
Exactly. It's about doing the right thing, even when nobody's watching.
For example, even if we have the legal authority to access someone's social media account, we should always ask ourselves, is this really necessary? Is it proportionate to the situation?
I love that. It's about using our discretion, not just our legal power.
And we need to be careful about how we use the information we gather. Sharing sensitive information or using social media to shame or humiliate someone, that's never okay.
Never. It's about treating people with respect and dignity, even when we're investigating them for a crime.
It's about remembering that we're held to a higher standard as law enforcement officers.
That's right. Our actions online, they reflect on the entire department, so we need to be mindful of that, always.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this section. The do's and don'ts, legal considerations, ethical considerations.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got a much better grasp of the complexities involved.
Me too, and I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about as they get ready for that test.
And for navigating the real world of social media.
Exactly. It's a complex world out there. But with the right knowledge and the right approach, we can use social media effectively, ethically, and safely.
Well said. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into the LAPD social media manual. Stay tuned. All right, we're back and ready to keep diving into this LAPD social media manual. We've talked about the big picture stuff, the rights, the risks, the 3 pillars.
Right.
But now, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay. Yeah.
The details that could make all the difference, not just on that test, but out there on the streets.
You got it. It's all about fine-tuning, like, a high-performance engine.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
We got the basics down, but now we got to make sure everything runs smoothly, efficiently.
So where do we start with this fine-tuning?
But let's talk about managing social media accounts.
Okay.
The manual, it's pretty clear on this. Setting up official LAPD accounts, that's the responsibility of the MCG LAPD online unit.
Makes sense.
Keeps things organized, prevents those unauthorized accounts from popping up.
Causing confusion.
Exactly. It's all about having that unified presence online.
So what about individual officers or units who want to have a social media presence?
It's not prohibited.
Okay.
But you got to be careful. Anything you post, even on a personal account, it can reflect on the department. The manual, it really stresses this. Getting approval from your commanding officer.
And following all the guidelines.
All of them. It's not a free-for-all.
It's about maintaining that professional image.
Protecting the integrity of the LAPD.
And those guidelines apply even when you're off duty.
24/7. Conduct unbecoming an officer, it extends to the online world too.
Okay, so we've talked about who can set up accounts. Now let's talk content. What are some best practices for posting on social media?
Whether it's an official account or an approved personal account.
Exact.
Two words come to mind: professionalism and accuracy. Everything you post, it should be well written, grammatically correct.
No typos.
Please, no typos.
Yeah.
And factually sound, no slang, no spreading disinformation.
Got it. So it's not just what we say, it's how we say it.
Exactly. Now, what about interacting with the public?
Oh, that's a good one. Is it okay for officers to respond to comments, answer questions online?
That's where it gets tricky. On one hand, engaging with the public, it can be a great way to build relationships,
To address concerns.
even gather information. But on the other hand,
It can be a minefield.
especially when you're dealing with sensitive topics, so you got to be careful.
So give us the cheat sheet. Online engagement for LAPD officers.
Okay, here it is. First, be respectful,
Always.
even when dealing with criticism. Second, avoid getting into arguments.
Online debates.
Yeah, those can go sideways fast.
Mm.
Remember, you're representing the LAPD, not your personal opinions.
Good point.
And third, if you're ever unsure about how to respond to something, err on the side of caution. Consult with your supervisor.
Choose your battles wisely.
Exactly. And always remember, social media, it's public forum,
So anything you post
even in a private message.
could potentially become public.
It could. So think before you post. Think twice before hitting send on that private message.
Good advice. Now, let's talk about how social media plays a role in emergency situations.
This is interesting. It's like social media becomes a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can be incredibly valuable.
How so?
Getting information out quickly, coordinating resources, connecting with the community during a crisis.
Like, I'm thinking of that example we talked about earlier.
Which one?
Using social media to provide real-time updates about the freeway closure.
Yeah, that's a good example. But on the other hand, social media can also be a breeding ground for rumors, misinformation.
And that can make things worse.
Absolutely. It can hamper emergency response efforts, create unnecessary panic. So it's about finding that balance.
Harnessing the power of social media without letting things spiral out of control.
You nailed it. And the manual, it emphasizes clear communication, coordination. There should be a designated spokesperson responsible for getting accurate information out there through official channels.
One voice, one message.
Exactly. Avoids confusion, mixed messages.
And it's important to remember, social media, it's just one tool in the emergency response toolbox.
Right. It should be used alongside traditional media, emergency alert systems, all those established communication channels.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. Managing accounts, handling emergencies, all kinds of stuff. Any final thoughts for our listeners as they get ready for that test and, for navigating the real-world challenges of social media?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Social media, it's a powerful tool. Potential for good, potential for bad. It's up to each of us to use it wisely, ethically, in a way that upholds the values of the LAPD.
And the reputation.
Of course, the reputation.
Mhm.
And don't forget, this manual, it's a living document. Social media is constantly changing, so stay curious, stay informed, be willing to adapt.
Because the landscape, it's always evolving. Well said. All right, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the LAPD social media manual. We hope you found it insightful and, dare we say, engaging. Knowledge is power, and we're here to help you unlock yours. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the LAPD social media manual. We've covered a lot, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
But there's still some key details, things that could make all the difference
Uh-huh.
on the test and, out there on the streets.
All about those fine points.
Exactly.
Oh,
So let's jump right in.
Right.
One thing the manual's really clear on,
Yeah.
managing those social media accounts.
Yes.
Specifically setting up official LAPD accounts.
Right.
That's the responsibility of the MCG LAPD online unit.
Makes sense.
You want to keep things, organized.
It's your assistant.
Yeah, consistent.
Yeah.
And it prevents those, rogue accounts,
Yeah.
unauthorized accounts from popping up.
Yeah, causing confusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about having that unified presence online.
One voice.
Right. Now, what about individual officers or units who want to have their own social media presence?
It's not prohibited.
Yeah.
But, like we've been saying, gotta be careful.
Anything you post
Even on a personal account.
can reflect on the department.
Exactly.
So the manual really stresses this.
What's that?
Getting approval from your commanding officer. And, of course, following all the guidelines.
All of them. It's not a free-for-all out there.
Definitely not. It's about maintaining that professional image.
Protecting the integrity of the LAPD.
Right. And those guidelines, they apply even when you're off duty.
204-7, my friend. 204-7. Conduct unbecoming an officer. It extends to the online world, too.
Okay, so we've talked about who can set up accounts.
Yeah.
Let's talk content.
All right, content.
What are some best practices for posting on social media?
Whether it's an official account or an approved personal account.
Exactly.
Professionalism,
Okay.
accuracy.
Right.
Everything you post, well-written, grammatically correct.
No typos?
Please, no typos. And the facts, make sure they're right. No slang. No spreading misinformation.
So it's not just what we say, it's how we say it.
Exactly. Presentation matters. Now, what about interacting with the public?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is a good one.
Is it okay for officers to respond to comments online? Answer questions.
That's where things can get tricky.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, engaging with the public, it can be a great way to build those relationships.
Address concerns.
Yeah, even gather information.
Right.
But on the other hand,
It can be a minefield.
especially those sensitive topics, got to be careful.
So give us the cheat sheet. Online engagement for LAPD officers.
Okay, first, be respectful,
Always.
even when dealing with criticism.
That's a tough one.
It is, but it's
Eh?
crucial. Second, those arguments, the online debates,
Yeah.
avoid them. They rarely end well. Remember, you represent the LAPD, not your personal opinions.
Good reminder.
And third, if you're ever unsure about how to respond,
What should you do?
err on the side of caution. Talk to your supervisor.
So choose your battles wisely.
Exactly. And never forget, social media, it's a public forum.
Meaning.
Anything you post, even in a private message, it could become public.
So think before you post.
Always. And think twice before hitting send on that private message.
Great advice. Now, let's talk about emergencies.
Okay.
How social media plays a role in those situations.
This is interesting. Because social media, it becomes like a double-edged sword.
How so?
On one hand, it can be incredibly valuable.
In what way?
Getting information out quickly, coordinating resources, connecting with the community during a crisis.
Like using social media to give real-time updates?
Exactly, like we talked about earlier, the freeway closure. But here's the other edge of that sword.
Yeah.
Social media can also be a breeding ground for rumors.
Misinformation.
Exactly, and that can really hamper emergency response effort.
Create unnecessary panic.
Right, so it's about finding that balance, harnessing the power of social media, but not letting things spiral out of control.
So how do we do that?
The manual, it stresses clear communication, coordination.
Okay.
There should be a designated spokesperson, someone responsible for getting accurate information out through those official channels.
One voice, one message.
Precisely. Avoids confusion, mixed messages.
And we have to remember, social media, it's just one tool in the emergency response toolbox.
Right. Use it alongside traditional media, emergency alert systems, all those other established communication channels.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Managing accounts, handling emergencies, all kinds of stuff. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah.
As they get ready for that test and, for navigating the real-world challenges of social media?
I think the most important takeaway is this. Social media is powerful. It has the potential for good.
And bad.
Right. And it's up to each of us to use it wisely, ethically.
In a way that upholds the values of the LAPD.
Absolutely. And remember, the manual, it's a living document. Social media is constantly changing. So stay curious, stay informed, be willing to adapt.
Well said. All right, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the LAPD social media manual. We hope you found it insightful and, dare we say, engaging. Knowledge is power, and we're here to help you unlock yours. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.